Echo TV is a co-production of Minnesota's Emergency and Community Health Outreach Collaborative of health, safety, ethnic, and nonprofit agencies, and TPT's Minnesota channel.
Hello and welcome to ECHO, which stands for Emergency and Community Health Outreach. I'm your host, Lillian McDonald, Public Information Officer for St. Paul Ramsey County Public Health. ECHO is a program dedicated to reaching health and safety information to English as a second language audiences. In this particular program, we provide in 6 different languages, including Spanish, Hmong, Somali, Lao, Vietnamese, and Khmer, serving our Cambodian audiences. But this program is also in English, and we're going to be providing information on a subject about lead paint, removing lead from homes, and why it's so important, especially in children. To get us started, please watch this.
Lead is a metal that is cheaper to use than gold or silver. You can't see it or smell it, but lead is harmful to your family's health. It could be in your house, especially if you live in an older home. Before 1978, lead was used to make house paint. Over time, lead paint will chip and flake, creating dust that can cause people to get sick. When we swallow the lead dust, we swallow poison. For good health, we need to protect our families, especially children, from lead poisoning because growing bodies are most vulnerable. Just a little lead can harm a child's development and cause learning and behavior problems that don't go away. Opening and closing windows can cause the lead paint to rest in windowsills where children play. Repairing windows and doors forces lead into the air and on the floor. There might be many layers of paint, but it's the lead in paint that is poisonous. Children doing things on the floor, crawling, eating, or playing with toys, can get lead dust on their hands and in their mouths, making them sick. Lead has a sweet taste, so young children may eat paint chips or chew paint on windows, the trim around the windows, or handrails along stairways. Lead can also be found on the ground outside because it was once used in gasoline. As cars moved, lead from burning gasoline filled the air and settled on the ground. Then, as people walked, their shoes carried the lead dust into yards and also onto the floors of homes where children play. Children are more likely to get sick from lead dust because lead can hurt natural growth, especially in the brain. Lead poisoning can slow a child's ability to learn and do well in school. To keep children free of lead poisoning, keep them away from lead dust and items made with lead. Lead test kits can help you find out if there is lead in paint, dust, or toys in your home. Local health departments and housing agencies have programs to help you find professionals trained to handle lead safely and teach you how to safely clean up lead. If you find paint chips in your home, keep children away from the area. You can close the door or window to the room or move the crib or bed. Protect your child from lead dust by washing the floors with water and household cleaner. Don't use a vacuum cleaner to pick up paint chips. Use water, household cleaner, and paper towels to wipe windowsills, woodwork, tables, and chairs. It's good to wear rubber gloves to keep your hands free of lead. Remember to wash your child's hands, face, and toys often with soap and water. If you or someone in your family uses lead or items made with lead at your job or as a hobby, be sure to change your clothes and wash your hands before touching or playing with children. For example, you might work on old cars and get lead dust on your clothing that ends up in your home. Wash work clothes separately from the family's clothes. There are usually no symptoms of lead poisoning in children until the health problems are very serious. To be safe, see a doctor and get a blood test for your child. This is especially important if you live in an old house where lead dust may need to be cleaned up.
Welcome back. You're watching ECHO. I'm your host, Lily McDonald, and we're talking about lead paint, especially in older homes and how to remove the paint, where it comes from, why it's here, all of that, to help us get more information on this issue. Joining me is Dan Simonik from the Minnesota Department of Health. Really appreciate you taking some time for us on
You're
ECHO.
welcome.
This is an old topic. Let's face it. I mean, it feels old anyway. I mean, lead paint, it's been around for a long time. I thought we got rid of this.
Yeah, lead as an element really has been around forever. It's been mined, was used heavily even back in Roman days. And certainly in the industrial area, used for any number of things. So yes, it really has been used for many different things, which is why any person you can pick across the world will have some measurable level of lead in their body.
Mm-hmm. And what's interesting, though, is that we're still talking about it today because it remains to be a problem.
Yeah, we certainly have made progress in it. It's in the late 70s, it was a much bigger problem than it is now. It really has been a success story, but we're not really done with it yet. In certain old homes and in certain high-risk areas, it still can pose quite a health risk. So that's why it's important to get the message out to those folks that if you live in one of these risk areas, you really do need to protect yourself from lead.
And it's clearly one of ECHO's goals to talk about the subject in multiple languages, because a lot of these English as second language families are living in these older homes where this really becomes a problem. Let's go to the basics. What is lead? What is lead, and where does it come from?
Well, lead's a heavy metal. It's mined from the ground like any of the other heavy metals. Where it frequently is found today is in old paint in houses built before 1978. And it was used in the paint as a stabilizer, and it helped it last longer. So even though you've painted over the top, the lead layer still is on the inside. And so it really is a housing-based problem at the moment, although we do have it in candy and jewelry and a number of other sources that kind of get high profile. We had the Reebok case a couple months ago where a child had a fatal poisoning, but for the most part, it's in old houses.
And this particular case you're referencing is a high dose, a high concentration of lead intake. But this particular program, we're focusing on sort of a subtle form of lead where this layers of paint over time wears thin, causing sort of a lead dust, if you will.
Yes,
and that's the problem.
Anytime the lead is present in the paint, if you have a windowsill, you open and close the window, it creates a friction surface. That dust gets down on the windowsill. If that gets down on the floor, your 2-year-old comes by, hand goes in dust. 2-year-olds are 2-year-olds, mouth goes into hand. That's how they get it in.
Mm-hmm. And it's not as simple as, and this is what's often advertised, it's not as simple as kids picking off paint chips and consuming them, but it has more to do with this lead dust particle that you don't see.
Right. Exactly. That by far is the most common route. Again, just general dust, and when the child goes through, then they pick that up in their mouth, just again through normal hand-to-mouth activities. That's how 2-year-olds explore their world, and then that's how they can get the lead level.
So why is this more challenging or more fatal, possibly fatal, in young children?
Well, we tell folks 1 and 2-year-old is the key age that we would like to get kids tested, although it's important up to age 6. The reason for that is a child's brain is still developing up until about age 5. Even though they're born, your brain still is doing connecting nerves and developing up until about age 5. So the lead coming in, because it's a neurotoxic and it affects the way your nervous system develops, it can really have a huge impact. At the very time your brain is most susceptible to it is when your hand-to-mouth is the most likely to pick it up. So it kind of is an unfortunate confluence, unfortunate timing. And
besides the brain, there are some other problems that are a result of lead poisoning.
Yeah, because it affects the brain and the nervous system, it can have, learning problems with learning, problems with behavior. Also can affect stature and some other, at higher levels, it can have some other effects too.
What about for adults?
With adults, you need a much higher dose because your nervous system is developed. You're a little less at risk, but it still can be very toxic. You need to, that can cause high blood pressure, it can cause tension, and things like that.
And so pregnant women, obviously.
Well, pregnant women, both for the woman and for the developing fetus, it can really, we have a whole separate set of guidelines that apply to pregnant women.
So how do you tell? I mean, I'm in this older home, this could be a problem. How do I tell if my child has a problem?
Well, that's one of the key things is you really can't tell just by looking at a child. They really don't have any external symptoms. When a child has a cold, you can tell. When they have the flu, you can tell. When they're lead poisoned, you really can't tell. So you need to go get a blood lead test. It's a very simple test, fairly straightforward to get. Almost all clinics will do it. It's a required part of Medicaid. A little prick on the finger will do it, or a venous test. They can get that interpreted. It's relatively cheap. And then that blood test gives you the concentration back that you can then use to determine kind of what your next steps are.
In working on this subject matter material, I thought it was interesting. You don't have to necessarily live in the home. You should have these tests too, even if you're just visiting older homes.
Yeah, if you're going to grandma and grandpa's or you're going into one of these older homes, yeah, you kind of have to apply the common sense. You know, is your child spending time in areas where this lead paint may be?
Mm-hmm. Now, what about age levels? You talked about children under 6 should be tested. How often do they need to be tested?
Well, it's important. Our state guidelines recommend that if you live in the city of Minneapolis or St. Paul, that all children be tested at 1 and 2. And so it's because there are so many older homes around, it just is a blanket recommendation. If you're in Minneapolis or St. Paul, get tested at 1 and 2. If you haven't had it at 1 or 2 and your child is 4 or 5 or 6, then you probably should get it tested. If you're coming in from another country, which is why this program is so important, you need to get tested both when you come and then 6 months later after you get in. And we're really trying to work on getting that second test done because it's done as part of the first screen. And so, but really, because it's such a simple test and relatively inexpensive, if a parent really has any concern about lead, go to your physician, recommend the test. They should be able to get it for you.
There'll be a questionnaire too. I'm sure the physician will probably run some of these families through and ask some questions and just be inquisitive about where they live and the surroundings around them and things like that.
Are you in an older home? Some questions about income as a reflection of some other things. Some things about hobbies. You know, do you fishing shot, stained glass, those kinds of things.
Well, what can I do to prevent lead poisoning at home? I mean, obviously, if I live in an older home, I probably want to check it.
Yeah, the first thing is be aware of what your surroundings are. Again, use common sense. If you're in an older home, you have decaying paint, chances are you have lead. There are lead tests available in hardware stores. Again, those are relatively inexpensive. You can take them home, they break them, and it'll indicate, won't give you a concentration, but it'll tell you if lead is present. So that's a way to check. And we have a wealth of information on our website for how to look, how to fix, how to clean, and a lot of those kinds of things. So, but it's mostly common sense. Find out if it's there. If it is, do simple things to avoid exposure.
So if it is present, then how do I take care of that situation? What do I do?
Well, if you do have the dust present, it's very important that you use wet methods is the most important common sense thing. Because you're talking about the dust, try and avoid vacuuming. That will kind of resuspend the dust. If you're not careful, you actually can make the problem much worse than what you had in the first place when people are doing remodeling. Again, unfortunate timing. You know, when a family is getting started, you kind of get the nesting instinct going and people want to remodel and do the nursery. That's the very time that you can, by sanding and get the dust all over the place, you really can create a problem. So it's mostly keep it wet and try and keep the dust down.
Soap and water?
Soap and water is a very good thing. Laying plastic down and picking that up is a very good thing.
And above all, if you suspect, keep the children away from the area. At least you can get it tested and then eventually treated.
Yes.
And there are resources available, are there not, where you can get some advice and some help on safe removal of lead paint?
Absolutely.
Where are the places to go to get that?
Again, the health department website, which will be on the ECHO website, we have a long list of links, federal, state, local. Local public health have a number of resources where people can come out and inspect or answer advice. Local public health nurses are all trained in this area and can give good advice to parents who are concerned or physicians who have questions. So lots of resources out there.
Good. Now, we talked about lead at home. What about lead at work?
Well, lead at work can be a problem because if you are exposed to it at work, you can bring it home on your clothes and then your kids can get exposed that way. So again, it's kind of the common sense test. If you have it at work, be careful with your clothes. Make sure you take those off either before you get in the house or try and keep those away from the children. Wash them separately because then that can intermix the lead. And just be aware that you have it and keep it away from the children.
So in summary then, it's important to be aware of the issue, have your home tested, have your child tested. Blood test is the best way to do it, especially if it's an older home, older than 1978.
78,
right?
Absolutely.
Well, I really appreciate the information today on ECHO.
You're welcome.
Thank you for joining us. It's a lot of information on lead poisoning and poison paint and all of the laws and the rules and where you can go to get more information. You can check that out in your local or state health department. I really appreciate our guest, Dan Simonic, being here from the Minnesota Department of Health. We talked about a lot of things, but essentially there's 3 key messages we want to try and get across in this particular program. First is lead is harmful, especially for young children. The second is lead is often found in the dust of old paint that is found in windows. And the third, children under 6 years of age should be checked for lead poisoning, especially if they live in older homes. Once again, I want to thank Dan Simonic from the Minnesota Department of Health for joining us, and for all of our contributors to this particular ECHO program. I've been your host, Lillian McDonald, from St. Paul Ramsey County Public Health and the producer of the ECHO TV programs. And you can get more information on this particular subject and other health and safety topics on the ECHO website. Please visit www.echominnesota.org. Once again, thank you very much for watching ECHO. Stay tuned. We have topics every month and many more to come. Thank you.
ECHO TV is a co-production of Minnesota's Emergency and Community Health Outreach Collaborative of health, safety, ethnic, and nonprofit agencies, and TPT's Minnesota channel.